The night Camille walked into our house wearing that black satin dress, everything I thought I knew about my marriage started to fracture. I was in the garage, rinsing off scuba tanks after a long day with tourists at the reef. The familiar smell of sea salt still clung to my skin when I heard something out of place, the sharp clack of heels on the kitchen tile. That sound hadn't echoed in our house for years. Camille always wore sneakers, house slippers maybe, never heels. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped inside. She was standing in front of the mirror in our hallway, adjusting the straps of a dress I'd never seen before. Black, tight, elegant in a way that made no sense for our sleepy coastal town. This was not a book club outfit. This was not a just catching up with the girls look. This was war paint. "Going somewhere?" I asked. Camille turned around slowly, her eyes meeting mine without flinching. That smile on her lips, it wasn't the one I fell in love with. It was cold, sharp, like a scalpel meant to slice clean through flesh and bone. "I'm going on a date," she said as casually as if she were announcing the weather. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. "A date?" "You heard me." She slipped on her earrings. "Try not to be too jealous, Ethan." She grabbed her clutch, checked her reflection again, and headed toward the door. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything. I did what 2 decades in the Navy and 15 years as a dive instructor had trained me to do: stay calm under pressure. "You might want to explain that to your sister when she stops by tomorrow," I said flatly. Camille froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, wiping my hands again. "Have a nice night." She stared at me for a second too long, then left. When the door shut behind her, the silence hit me harder than any storm at sea. 21 years, 2 kids, a life built from sweat and seawater. And she walked out like it was just Tuesday. Not even a flinch. No guilt. Just pure amusement at my shock. The betrayal didn't kill me. It was how easy it was for her. I sat on the couch, still holding the towel like it could anchor me to reality. My mind spun. That wasn't the first time she'd done this. No one breaks the truth like that unless they've rehearsed it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with a bottle of whiskey and a locked fireproof box from the hallway closet. Inside were old tax returns, property documents, and bank statements Camille said she'd take care of. She always said she was better with numbers. Turns out she was better at hiding them. There were 3 bank accounts I'd never seen before: a P.O. box in Key Largo listed as her mailing address, hotel bills from Marathon, receipts from a luxury lingerie store in Tampa, restaurant tabs from places I'd never been. I wasn't just being cheated on, I was being erased. Camille wasn't just having an affair. She was preparing for something bigger than infidelity. I called Naomi Pierce the next morning. We hadn't talked in years, but once upon a time we trained together in Coronado. She went FBI, I went Navy. We trusted each other with our lives back then. I hoped that still counted. "Ethan." Her voice was warm, but alert. "I need a favor," I said. By the time I finished the story, Naomi wasn't smiling anymore. "Send me everything," she said. "Receipts, photos, bank statements. Do not confront her. If she's this bold, there's more going on than just a side relationship. This might be criminal." Criminal. The word echoed in my ears. I looked down at the photo of our wedding day still hanging on the living room wall. We were barefoot on the beach, both of us laughing into the wind. I believed in that laugh. But the woman who wore that black dress. By the time Naomi called me back, I'd already pieced together more than I wanted to believe. She wasn't just cheating. She was coordinating something, financial, deliberate, and deeply calculated. "I ran a preliminary background check on Camille," Naomi said over the phone. "She recently added a secondary contact to your joint LLC. His name is Dr. Lane Rosenthal." I froze. "Rosenthal? As in Julian Rosenthal?" "Yes," Naomi confirmed. "The same psychologist your son Milo has been seeing for the past 6 months." A gust of cold air seemed to pass through the room despite the humid North Carolina summer. "She's sleeping with our son's therapist?" Naomi's voice softened. "It gets worse. Dr. Rosenthal has recently been flagged in a federal ethics inquiry, manipulating court-ordered psychological evaluations in exchange for bribes." My grip on the phone tightened. Are you saying she's not just cheating, Ethan? Camille is using the affair to influence Milo's custody evaluations. My heart hit the floor. 6 months ago, Camille had pushed for therapy for Milo, said he'd been showing signs of anxiety and mood swings. I'd agreed, wanting the best for our son, but I hadn't been allowed to attend any sessions. Camille insisted that Milo would be more comfortable opening up without me there. I'd trusted her. Now I realized it was a setup. Naomi continued, Ethan, I need to ask you something very serious. Have you noticed any change in Milo's behavior or records being kept? Any signs of manipulation? I paused, staring at the fridge where Camille had pinned Milo's behavioral progress chart. Recently, it showed erratic changes, up 1 week, crashing the next. Camille explained it away as adolescent mood swings, but now it looked staged. I need to get Milo out of that house, I said under my breath. Not yet, Naomi cautioned. We need proof. If Camille has any legal edge due to Rosenthal's influence, you moving too soon could backfire. But we'll get her, Ethan. You have my word. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the back porch with my old Navy field notebook, scribbling down every memory, every clue, every gut feeling I'd brushed off. The dinner parties she suddenly cancelled. The cash withdrawals labelled therapy-related expenses. The tension in Milo's voice when I asked about Dr. Rosenthal. And then something clicked. 3 weeks ago, I'd picked Milo up early from school, due to a weather warning. When I arrived, he wasn't in his homeroom. I checked the front office. They called down, confused. Camille already signed him out, the secretary said. I called Camille that afternoon. She said she'd taken Milo to a special session with Dr. Rosenthal, but that session hadn't shown up on any of our billing statements. Back then, I hadn't thought to question it. Now I opened my laptop, logged into our insurance portal and searched through every claim. Session dates with Dr. Rosenthal were billed regularly, except for that day. No record, nothing. They were somewhere else. Doing what? I forwarded everything to Naomi. The photos of Camille's strange receipts, the behavior chart, the missing insurance entry. 20 minutes later, she called back. Ethan, I have an idea, but it's risky. Tell me. I have contacts with the Department of Health and Human Services. If Rosenthal is manipulating custody cases, this goes beyond infidelity. It's medical fraud. We can get a subpoena for his appointment logs, but we'll need corroborating data first. Do you have access to any shared calendars, devices, or even a GPS tracker in Camille's car? I stared out the window at her shiny new hybrid SUV, sitting in the driveway like a loaded gun. Yes, I said slowly. Her car uses integrated tracking. She's got it synced with her phone. Naomi exhaled. Then we may have a way in. By the next morning, I decreated a clone of Camille's GPS history, using a sync app we used for family trips. I forwarded her location logs for the past 90 days. The results were explosive. Half the time, Camille claimed to be attending book club or Milo's therapy sessions. She wasn't even in the same town. There were repeated visits to a small private estate 40 minutes west of our house. The owner, according to county records, Julian Rosenthal. Bingo! I stared at the blinking red pin on the map, feeling the bile rise in my throat. They'd taken my son there, repeatedly, not for therapy, for manipulation, control, evidence. Naomi's response was immediate. Ethan, this is the breakthrough we needed. We're opening a case now. Don't tell Camille anything. Let me do the digging. I won't say a word, I promised. But inside, the tide had turned. I wasn't just documenting betrayal anymore. I was going to destroy the empire she built on lies. For the next 48 hours, I lived a double life. By day, I was the calm father, dropping Milo at school, answering Camille's casual questions with hollow smiles, pretending nothing had changed. By night, I was a ghost, combing through documents, tracking GPS data, and documenting everything Naomi might need. The hardest part? Acting like I didn't know that the woman I once trusted more than anyone had weaponized our child. It was Sunday morning when I got the first big break. Milo and I were watching a movie, something loud and animated, when Camille walked in holding a beige folder. She glanced at us briefly before heading upstairs, but something about her walk struck me. It was tight, anxious. Once she was out of sight, I hit pause. Hey, buddy, I said, bathroom break, be right back. I followed her, barefoot and silent. She didn't close the bedroom door all the way. I peeked through the cracked doorframe. She was kneeling beside her nightstand, flipping through the folder in a panic. Dozens of papers. Some were financial, others bore the seal of the North Carolina Family Court. Custody documents. She pulled out a yellow highlighter and started marking sections quickly. Then she tucked the entire folder into the bottom drawer of the closet and stacked sweaters on top of it. It took everything in me not to confront her right then. Instead, I walked away, went back downstairs, and resumed the movie with Milo. But I was no longer just suspicious. I knew. And now I had a target. That evening, I waited until Camille went for her usual 8 p.m. run. She'd gotten obsessed with fitness lately, or rather with how she looked while pretending nothing was wrong. I went upstairs, opened the closet drawer, and lifted the sweaters. There it was, a legal folder stamped confidential. Inside were copies of psychological assessments, transcripts of Dr. Rosenthal's reports, and, to my horror, a letter Camille had drafted to the court, claiming I had anger issues triggered by PTSD from military service. My hands shook. I'd served 12 years in the Navy with honor. I'd seen things, I had scars, but I'd never, not once, raised a hand to Camille or Milo. She was preparing to portray me as unstable in order to win full custody. I scanned and photographed every page. Then I left everything exactly as it was and returned to the porch like nothing had happened. At midnight, I emailed the files to Naomi. I titled the folder, Weaponized Fatherhood. Her response came at 6:07 a.m. Ethan, this is Gold. I'm contacting a federal mediator. We need to escalate now. By Monday afternoon, Naomi had looped in a contact from the Department of Justice. His name was Will Chang, a mediator who specialized in family court corruption and judicial ethics. We met in a quiet coffee shop downtown. He listened silently as Naomi and I laid out everything: the affair, the manipulation of therapy records, the forged narratives of abuse. Will only asked one question when we finished. Are you ready for this to get ugly? I nodded. This is going to involve subpoenas, depositions, and possibly a media firestorm. Once we hit the court system, it won't just be your wife in the crosshairs. If Rosenthal is tied to multiple custody frauds, this could go national. What happens to Milo? I asked, my voice quiet. That's why we do this right, he said. We build a wall of evidence, airtight. That way, when it all collapses, you're the only one still standing. Over the next 72 hours, things moved fast. Naomi drafted a formal complaint and filed it through the DOJ's internal whistleblower portal. Will began collecting records from other families affected by Dr. Rosenthal. To my shock, several had already come forward, their stories eerily similar. Fathers painted as dangerous, reports filed without basis, all linked back to Rosenthal. Camille had stepped into a much bigger storm than she realized. And then came the moment I'd dreaded. Friday afternoon, Camille burst into the house like a storm. You violated my privacy, she shouted, slamming her purse down. I was at the kitchen counter, chopping carrots. I didn't flinch. What are you talking about? You were in my closet. I looked up slowly. So we're calling it yours now? She froze for a second, realizing her mistake. I wiped my hands. Camille, sit down. Don't you dare lecture me. I'm not. I'm offering you one final opportunity to explain yourself before this goes to court. Her eyes darted. She was cornered. You read the letter. I read all of it, including the part where you accuse me of being a threat to my own son. She said nothing. I leaned forward. I loved you for 15 years. I trusted you with everything, but you used our son as a weapon. That's beyond betrayal. That's war. Tears welled up, but I'd seen crocodile tears before. I stood. The DOJ is involved now. Your games are over. But for Milo's sake, I'm giving you one chance to walk away quietly. She looked up, stunned. You'd still let me leave? I'd let you leave with what dignity you have left. Camille didn't respond. She just walked upstairs and slowly, and shut the door. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally taking back my life. The therapist's office had always been a place of neutrality. A quiet room with muted walls, a diffuser humming in the corner, and shelves lined with books on child development and emotional resilience. But now, it felt like a war zone. And Dr. Elijah Mercer wasn't just the therapist anymore, he was the enemy. I sat across from him with my arms folded, watching as he leaned forward in his leather chair like a confidant. But I could see the rehearsed lines in his eyes, the studied sympathy in his voice. "Mr. Alden," he said smoothly, "Gracie's emotional state has shown improvement during sessions with her mother present. I believe continued contact is essential." This was the third time in 2 weeks he'd recommended unsupervised visits for Camille. "She lied in court, doctor," I said, voice steady but sharp. "She fabricated stories about abuse. And you're telling me she deserves more access now?" Dr. Mercer folded his hands and tilted his head, as if I were a slow student missing the point. "Children need their mothers," I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood. "So we're just ignoring the forged prescriptions? The child psychologist she threatened into silence? You're really going to overlook that?" His expression didn't change. "I deal in present emotional behavior, not legal accusations. My job is to protect Gracie's psychological stability. Protect it or sell it?" I left the session shaking with fury, my fists clenched in my jacket pockets as I walked down the hallway. Naomi was waiting in the car, her sunglasses hiding the concern in her eyes. She didn't speak until we were several blocks away. "You were right," she said. "We pulled his financials. Dr. Mercer received 3 payments last month from a consulting firm, owned by Camille's new lawyer." I slammed my hand against the dashboard. "God damn it." "That's not all," she added. "He also signed off on a court-ordered behavioral evaluation for Gracie 2 months ago. Camille used it to file an emergency motion to limit your custody." I felt sick. "They're buying her innocence." "No," Naomi said, eyes cold. "They're manufacturing it." That evening, I went through Gracie's drawings. They were scattered across the kitchen table, crayon dreams of boats and stars, a house with a big tree, but one stood out, a tall man with no face, looming next to a little girl who was crying. "What is this?" I asked her gently. She looked at it for a long time. "That's Mommy's friend. He talks too loud. I don't like when he's near me." I stared at the figure. A dark suit, no eyes. It wasn't me, it wasn't Camille. It was Mercer. The next morning, I filed an emergency motion for a third-party evaluation, but Naomi had a better idea. "We don't just need a counter-assessment," she said. "We need proof Mercer's manipulating the system, and I know just the person." Her contact was a retired child advocacy specialist named Evelyn Price. She'd spent decades consulting for high-profile custody cases, and her reputation was unimpeachable. When Evelyn arrived at my house that afternoon, she barely glanced at the coffee I offered. "Where's the kid?" she asked. "Upstairs. Drawing." She walked straight up, no small talk. Half an hour later, she came down and said, "That girl is scared of someone, but she's trying very hard not to disappoint her mother." My chest ached. "Can you help?" "I can testify, but I want to talk to this therapist myself." Naomi grinned. "We were hoping you'd say that." 3 days later, Evelyn walked into Dr. Mercer's office, posing as a new client with a child in need of evaluation. She recorded everything. He didn't just nudge toward unsupervised visits. He insisted on them. Even when Evelyn described red flag behaviors like night terrors, mood swings, and emotional withdrawal, he suggested the child needed more maternal presence. The audio was damning, and it was admissible. When we brought the recording to the judge during the emergency hearing, the courtroom turned silent. The judge's face went from stone to rage in under a minute. Naomi presented the financial records, linking Mercer to Camille's legal team, and Evelyn submitted her testimony regarding Gracie's fear responses. Then came the final blow. Gracie's drawing. "She didn't know this man's name," I said, voice trembling as I handed over the picture. "But she drew him from memory." The judge paused. Then he turned to Camille, whose face was pale and frozen. "Custody of the minor is immediately suspended from the mother, pending criminal investigation." Camille screamed in protest, but the bailiff had already stepped between us. For the first time in weeks, I pulled Gracie into my arms and whispered, "You're safe now." But this wasn't over, not even close. I had stared at my son's therapist across 100 polished mahogany sessions, watching the woman I trusted peel open my child's soul with calm, surgical precision. Dr. Evelyn Hartman, gentle voice, kind eyes, a reputation so solid she was regularly asked to testify in court on behalf of children in traumatic custody battles. And now, she was the very knife in our family's back. The moment Naomi showed me the hidden camera footage, my hands clenched so hard I left indentations on my desk. Evelyn, in my house, kissing my wife. On the couch where my son once fell asleep watching cartoons. They weren't just having an affair, they were conspiring. Every session Evelyn held with my son, every nod, every scribble in her notebook, had been weaponized to paint me as unstable, paranoid, even potentially dangerous. "Ethan," Naomi said carefully, "this video is admissible, and we can tie Evelyn to direct judicial misconduct." My voice cracked. "How long?" Naomi sighed. "Months, maybe a year. We've checked court records." Evelyn's evaluations helped swing decisions in 5 separate cases, all in favor of mothers. And 3 of those women had financial ties to Gloria's charity foundation. That's when the dots connected. Gloria's foundation, a non-profit created to empower single mothers. That had always sounded noble, hadn't it? It was a front, a laundering mechanism, a pressure machine squeezing the system in their favor, using Evelyn's status and Gloria's public image to quietly steer judges and counselors behind the scenes. I leaned back in my chair, rage simmering just beneath my skin. They were willing to sacrifice my son's well-being, to manipulate the courts to publicly assassinate my character, all for money, custody, and control. And they almost got away with it. Naomi slid a sealed envelope across the table. "This is our next step. It's a court-ordered subpoena to recover Evelyn's session notes, communication logs, and tax filings. We've already got a friendly judge on board." "What do I need to do?" "Stay the hell out of it," Naomi said sharply. "From now on, you're the perfect worried father. You play dumb, you love your son, you follow every legal step. Let me and my team handle the dirty work." I swallowed hard. That was the hardest part. Doing nothing while evil slithered through your home like smoke. But Naomi was right. Every time I confronted Gloria, it gave her ammunition. Every time I got angry, she twisted it into justification. I needed to become the one thing she couldn't anticipate: patient. That night, I tucked Oliver into bed. His little arms clutched my neck. "Dad, is Mom mad at you?" My throat closed. "No, buddy. Mom just needs time. But I'm here. Always." He blinked slowly, believing me, because he still lived in a world where parents didn't lie, where love wasn't used as leverage. And in that moment, I made a vow. Not just to expose Evelyn, not just to take Gloria down, but to protect Oliver from ever knowing how ugly the world could get. Naomi was methodical, ruthless when needed, but never reckless. That morning, she arranged a meeting in a private suite at the courthouse with Judge Renata Langley, the woman originally assigned to our custody case. "She agreed to meet?" I asked, shocked. Judges rarely meet outside official hearings. Naomi nodded. "She thinks she's doing a favor for Evelyn." I nearly choked. So the corruption goes higher. Not yet, but the patterns are troubling. Judge Langley has ruled in 12 cases involving Evelyn Hartman's testimony. In 11 of them, custody was awarded to the mother, even when evidence pointed the other way. I felt sick. As we entered the courthouse, I rehearsed my expression. I wasn't here as an accuser. I was here as a concerned father, a composed man, a man who still believed in justice, no matter how poisoned the system had become. Judge Langley greeted us with polite restraint. Early 60s, power haircut, crisp blazer, the type of woman who smiled like a razor and never blinked twice. "Ms. Voss," she said to Naomi, "I understand you have a matter regarding Dr. Hartman's upcoming deposition." "I do," Naomi said, "but I also believe Your Honor needs to see this before that happens." She slid the flash drive across the table like a poker player going all in. Langley inserted it into her laptop. What she saw changed everything. Evelyn, on video, kissing Gloria, whispering, laughing, trading files, strategizing. The judge's face didn't move for 30 full seconds. Then she said, "Do you have audio?" "Yes," Naomi replied. It's clean. We've enhanced it. We also have evidence of financial transactions from Gloria's foundation to Evelyn's private account. Thousands of dollars, disguised as speaker fees for events that never happened. Langley leaned back, processing. Her jaw twitched. I expected denial, outrage, accusation. But she simply asked, "Do you have the names of the other families affected?" "Yes, we're compiling affidavits. 3 of them have already agreed to testify. One of them," Naomi opened a folder, "was your nephew's custody case, 2019. That landed like a sledgehammer. Langley's composure cracked for just a second. "I see." She didn't say much more. But when we walked out of that room, Naomi whispered, "She knew, not all of it, but enough, and now she's realizing she might have been used." Later that night, Gloria came home in full performance mode. Flowers, a bottle of wine, her favorite perfume, the one she only wore when she needed something. "I've been thinking," she said, wrapping her arms around me like she hadn't tried to destroy my life. "Maybe we should revisit therapy. For the marriage. For Oliver." I nodded slowly. "I've been thinking too." Her smile froze. "About how we can fix things?" she asked, blinking too quickly. "About consequences," I said gently. "About what happens when you underestimate someone." Can't I walked away, her arms empty, her act falling apart, while upstairs Oliver slept peacefully, unaware of the storm about to break. The courtroom was packed. I had expected a quiet hearing, maybe half a dozen observers. But Naomi had pulled strings with journalists and advocacy groups. Every seat was filled. Mothers, fathers, attorneys, a few retired judges. Even a local news crew was setting up quietly in the back row. Gloria arrived 10 minutes late, wearing an ivory blazer and crocodile tears. Evelyn was with her, stone-faced and smug, flipping through a thick folder like she owned the damn court. The judge presiding today wasn't Renata Langley. She had recused herself from the case 2 days earlier. No explanation given, but Naomi and I knew she didn't want to sit on the same bench as a scandal that could end careers. Taking her place was Judge Trevor Monroe, ex-military, no-nonsense and immune to theatrics. Thank God. "All rise," the bailiff called out, and with that, the final act began. Naomi stood. "Your Honor, we are here today to challenge the credibility and professional ethics of Dr. Evelyn Hartman in this custody matter." The judge raised an eyebrow. "On what basis?" Naomi smiled. "On grounds of collusion, fraud, and gross misconduct, we intend to show that Dr. Hartman not only violated ethical standards, but conspired with Mrs. Gloria Ellis to manipulate psychological evaluations in a custody dispute, including falsified reports, forged billing, and undisclosed financial entanglements." The courtroom gasped. Gloria turned pale. Evelyn smirked, that same condescending smirk she wore in every meeting, until Naomi placed a printed transcript on the bench. "The court has already received video and audio evidence, Your Honor," Naomi continued. "This is just the beginning." I watched as Judge Monroe read. His face remained stone, but his fingers clenched. "You're alleging that a licensed therapist fabricated evaluations for personal and financial gain?" "Yes, sir," Evelyn shot up. "This is outrageous. I demand—" "You'll have your turn, Dr. Hartman," the judge said flatly. "For now, sit down." Naomi handed over more documents, emails, deposits, calendars that didn't match records. Then she called the first witness, Peter Ross, Evelyn's former office assistant. Peter looked like a man on the edge, nervous, clutching a folder. But when Naomi gently guided him through the questions, he transformed into a man unloading years of guilt. "I saw her change the assessment scores," he said, voice shaking. "The father's reports were always lowered. The mother's were padded. Sometimes Evelyn didn't even meet the parents, just filled out forms based on what Gloria said." Gasps again. Evelyn stood up again. "Lies! He was fired for—" "Sit down," Judge Monroe snapped. "You're not helping yourself." Then Naomi dropped the bombshell. She called Judge Langley herself. The room fell into stunned silence. Langley took the stand in full robes. Her expression was iron. "I was made aware last week of irregularities in multiple custody rulings where Dr. Hartman had testified," she said, each word landing like a gavel strike. "I have since reviewed my judgments. I believe I was misled, and I support the motion to have all of Dr. Hartman's testimonies suspended pending investigation." It was over. Evelyn sank in her seat, frozen. Gloria stared ahead, mouth slightly open. Judge Monroe turned to me. "Mr. Ellis, until a new evaluation is performed by a third-party clinical team, temporary sole custody of Oliver Ellis is granted to you." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just breathed. A breath I'd been holding for years. Naomi leaned over and whispered, "We're not done yet." I nodded. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. And we were just getting started. 3 days after the courtroom bombshell, Evelyn Hartman was officially suspended by the State Psychological Board, pending a full investigation. But the real tremor hit when Naomi filed a motion to reopen every case Dr. Hartman had touched in the past 5 years. Within a week, the district attorney's office received affidavits from 3 other parents claiming similar manipulation in their custody evaluations, all with links to Gloria. Apparently, Evelyn had built a quiet empire of favors, choosing sides, slanting reports, and hiding payoffs. And Gloria, she wasn't just one desperate mother clinging to custody. She was a recruiter. The one who whispered to other struggling moms, "I know someone who can help." But this time her little web caught the wrong fly. The morning after the motion was filed, our front porch was crowded with reporters. Naomi had warned me, "They'll dig into everything, your business, your marriage, even your kid. Be ready." I was, because I had nothing to hide. The day after, the governor's office announced the formation of an emergency oversight committee to review all family court expert witnesses statewide. Naomi gave testimony in a closed-door session. I watched it live from my laptop while holding Oliver on my lap. It was the first time in months that he fell asleep in my arms without flinching. "This isn't just about my client," Naomi said in her closing statement. "This is about a system that lets gatekeepers become executioners, where truth bends to profit and psychology is for sale." The committee nodded, and the fallout began. The first indictment came down within 48 hours. Dr. Evelyn Hartman charged with professional misconduct, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Then came Gloria's arrest. They came to her apartment at dawn. Neighbors watched as she was walked out in cuffs, face stone cold and silent. But I didn't rejoice. I just held Oliver's hand tighter. Gloria's trial began 3 months later. This time, I didn't watch from the sidelines. I testified, so did Peter Ross. So did 2 of Gloria's former friends who had received recommendations to Dr. Hartman. In exchange for favors Gloria used to build political goodwill at PTA meetings and charity events. In the end, Gloria wasn't just convicted of custodial interference. She was convicted of racketeering. Naomi turned to me after the sentencing. "We didn't just win, Adam. We cracked the whole damn machine." It was over. At least the legal war was. But healing, that takes longer. The weeks after the trial felt strange and like waking up after a hurricane. Oliver had nightmares less often. I slept without checking the door locks 10 times a night. And Naomi, God, Naomi, didn't vanish after the verdict like lawyers usually do. One night, over takeout, she admitted something I hadn't expected. "I didn't just take your case because of the injustice," she said. "I took it because I used to be that kid, the one stuck in the middle, watching adults turn love into leverage." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Because suddenly I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I'd found. 2 months after the trial, Oliver and I moved into a small beachside house 2 hours south. It wasn't fancy, but it had something we hadn't felt in years: peace. Every morning, we walked barefoot across the sand to watch the sunrise. I'd sip coffee while Oliver collected shells and tried to name seabirds from a field guide Naomi had given him. For the first time in his short life, he wasn't afraid of silence. One morning, he asked me, "Dad, are bad people born that way?" I set my mug down and knelt beside him. "No, son, but some people make bad choices, and sometimes those choices hurt people who didn't deserve it." "Like Mom?" I nodded. "Yeah, but what matters is what we choose to do now. We can be better. We will be." Oliver smiled and tossed a shell into the waves. "Then I choose to be kind." That was the moment I knew he was going to be okay. Naomi came to visit a week later, on a surprise weekend trip. She brought peanut butter brownies and a book of puzzles for Oliver, who now treated her like a superhero. That night, after Oliver went to bed, we sat on the back porch under a string of solar lights. "You know what you built here," Naomi said. "A sanctuary, not just for Oliver, for you, for me, maybe." I laughed. "You planning to move in?" "Not today, but maybe someday." She reached across the table and took my hand. I didn't pull away. For the first time since the war that tore my family apart, I wasn't haunted by what I'd lost. I was humbled by what had survived. Naomi didn't save us, but she showed me where the light was. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start again. A month later, I got a call from a former client at the school district. They wanted to know if I'd consider teaching part-time again. "Psychology?" I asked. "Ethics," they said. "No one knows more about it than you now." I said yes, because Oliver wasn't the only one getting a second chance.